Hi everyone, Joshua Johnson here, and I want to talk to you today about open educational resources. Specifically focusing on textbooks, I think most of us might know the term open source. These are really open source textbooks. They are textbooks made available typically through the Creative Commons licensing that allows you as an instructor to distribute them freely amongst your students. Now, these textbooks, some of the sites that I'm going to show you, in many cases have been peer-reviewed, written by scholars, written by college professors and doctors, or even teams of people at universities. The goal for writing these textbooks and making them free to everyone is really to allow everyone access without the cost getting in the way to materials that are well written. I also want to point out that I think when students come to your classroom, they're not really looking forward to, I'm going to that class because I'm going to learn from that textbook. They're taking that class because they want to learn from that instructor. Remember, you're the expert. The textbook is there to support you and your teaching. It's also worth noting that many of these open source ones come, with the same types of instructor materials that you're used to seeing from actual publishers. So let's dive right in and take a look at a few different resources. The first two that I want to take a look at are the OpenText Library and OpenStax. The OpenText Library really is kind of like that first stop for me when I'm just looking and evaluating textbooks. It has a lot of textbooks by a lot of different authors in a lot of different subject areas. It allows you to download, edit, and distribute. The digital distribution, however, sometimes is really left up to the author. Like, do they want to provide a PDF file? Do they want to provide an LMS course shell? Do they want to provide an EPUB? So that is one of the things that I'm not really a fan of, but as far as just finding materials, it's a great first place to start. I would say if you're in kind of more of the mathematical and science area, OpenStax, which is produced by Rice University, offers some really excellent materials in your algebras, your chemistries, your statistics, etc. And those can all be available or to review at openstax.org. The next one I want to talk about, not because it sounds like I'm going to go to California for a little while, but just it's multimedia educational resource for online teaching, also known as Merlot. It's really one of the states that's been at the forefront of freely providing textbooks and resources has been the University of California, especially UC Davis. And this is kind of designed in conjunction with them to look at more than just textbooks. So now we're also talking about applets, interactive things that students could do on their computers and devices to engage with material or just engage with simulations, etc. But specifically, you can narrow this down to textbooks as well. LibreText, I think, is a little bit more interesting because LibreText really is designing almost like what you're going to see with Flatworld a little bit later. They have their own kind of textbook published website, if you will. Like the textbook is delivered through here for consistency's sake. When a student adds something to their site, it goes on their LibreText dashboard, and then it has some common features throughout. So I really like it, and it does boast some of the better integrations right into LMSs. The next one I want to talk about is BC Campus, which is kind of a Canadian-funded project started in 2012. What I really like about this one is not only does it have a lot of majors kind of covered here, it also contains guides and toolkits for how to use these open educational resources to the point of actually having professional development materials that are open resource. Other one, kind of the last big one, is the OER Commons. I think of this kind of like Merlot. You're going to find much more than just textbooks here, but you can narrow your search down. And again, that open source, or OER for open educational resource, is kind of one of the big Google search terms anyway. So this is kind of like the granddaddy. I'm not going to say the granddaddy, but it's one of the big players in the open educational space. The last thing I want to show you is really Flatworld. Flatworld is not so much open source, but it's similar because Flatworld does allow authors that are using their texts to modify the text, add and write chapters into their textbook themselves. Flatworld exists at WLC primarily through a site license where students and faculty can access any of these texts at no cost. Keep in mind that that does mean that you are going to be using Moodle in order to access these. They are not available in MyWLC. In order to do that, you could do it right now. If you have a Moodle class, you can go and add an activity or resource, give that resource a name and click the select content, where you will be able to either search by ISBN or browse their catalog in order to find a textbook for your class. When you click on it, the textbook title will appear and you will see kind of a description of all of the supplementary materials that come with this. In some cases, there are Quizlets, there are self-graded quiz for the students to take, practice quizzes, if you will. In many cases, we are talking about quiz banks, instructor PDFs or instructor PowerPoints, lecture notes, etc. We'll tell you what's available with it along with the link book. When you link the book, it's just going to show up in your Moodle page as a link. In this case, you'll see one for financial accounting there. And clicking on that will actually take you into your account. You don't create one. It creates one for you based on the integration with Moodle. It'll create your account. It will log you in. It will take you to your textbook. It's interesting to note that as the instructor, you can also go to a dashboard from that same page. As the instructor, you can see supplemental materials like the PDFs and PowerPoints and quiz banks, etc., in order to download those and use with your course. So hopefully this gives you just a real quick overview of some of the things that are available. I'd strongly encourage you to check those out, especially as we think about kind of designing and constant redesigning of our classes in order to continue to stay up to date, not only with the material that we're teaching, but also with the methods that we are using to instruct. So thank you very much, and God's blessings on your discussion about open educational resources.